Hi, have you ever wondered how to frame your own paintings on canvas or panel into what's called open back frames? Have you ever struggled to build a hanging kit so that you have all your hardware handy for those last minute shows and deadlines? Today, we're going to take a look at how to install the hardware and get set up for adding frames to your artwork and quick and easy ways to keep something accessible and easy for entry at those last minute deadlines. So in this video, we're going to be exploring what it means to create a kit for hanging artwork and also just show you a couple of examples of how you can hang artwork. Now, of course, there's no right or wrong way to do this. There's just what over time fits most standards and what tends to be the most secure with the least amount of effort. So when building a kit, it could be something as simple as just gathering some tools, but I've put together a little tote box that I carry around, and it oftentimes will include a Phillips head screwdriver, but I have also upgraded to a cordless drill. It's just a lot easier to get the job done, but either would be just as effective, and sometimes I'll just keep both in there just for handiness in case the battery dies on the drill. What I also like to include is a set of needle nose pliers. I like to include a set of wire snips that cuts the wire fairly easy. The needle nose pliers will cut the wire, but I've found that over time they can get kind of dull, so I just like to keep a separate set of snips and a separate set of needle nose for the clamps. I also keep some soft wire. This is soft strand and it's a coated wire, which means that it's a braided wire which has multiple wires threaded together, but there's a plastic coating around the edge so that the little stray wires don't puncture your skin. I've had that happen way too many times. And you can get a nice big roll for really inexpensive on Amazon, and it lasts for quite some time. I also get these braces or brackets. They're picture hanging, and they come in two different depths. You can see here that I believe one's 1/2 inch and one's 3/4 inch, and it's all relative to the canvas that is protruding out of the back, which I'll talk about in just a moment. But I get a bag of those also on Amazon. They sell smaller packs of them at the local art store, but I like to go ahead and just get large amounts so that I'm covered with what I need. Then also I get what's known as a D-ring clip. The D-rings go in flat on the back of the artwork, and they allow the wire to hang much easier. They're way more efficient than the eye hooks. I'm not sure if you're familiar with an eye hook. These are eye hooks, and typically they get screwed into the back, but they're very hard on the fingers, and they also protrude off the back of the artwork, and I'll show you in just a moment. So they're not really recommended for this. I would encourage you to not use those at all. This is what's known as a sawtooth hanger, and it also is not very good for most standard showings. It oftentimes will not allow a gap enough to hang on a nail, so a lot of exhibitions and shows will actually exclude any works done with a sawtooth hanger, so I wouldn't do that also. So most times it's easy to use an open back frame. An open back frame has the back already set so that panels or canvases can go in the back and the hardware be applied. Sometimes they will have nicks or dings on them, even in the art store, and people will seldom give discounts for that, even though they're already damaged. So if you catch yourself in that situation and there's nothing else, or if you damage it at home, you can always use a little bit of clear gel. In this case, I'm just taking some regular gel gloss and just applying it on my finger, and I'm just going to fill in the hole and smooth it over so that that can dry inside the painting, almost like you're caulking a little hole. And of course it'll dry clear, and I can take several applications with it if I like, but if you're really smooth with it, you can get it off and it's no problem. And then I'll just take a paper towel and wipe the surplus off. And then when it dries, I'll have a smooth texture to put some black paint on, and it basically fills it. And you know, I don't think we should have to do this work when we buy product, but sometimes there's just nothing else available and time is short. So, plus sometimes I do it myself, where I nick the painting or the frame and want something to fix. Okay, so I'm going to set this aside and let it dry. Now, when it comes to framing with an open back frame, I can flip it open, and depending on the depth of the artwork, meaning that if I work on a panel like this, or if I work on a canvas like this, it's going to both work with the open back frame. The panel simply drops in, and you have a little bit of leeway where you can add a point setter. A point setter is a gun that actually adheres into the artwork just by pushing up against the edge and pushing, and it puts these prongs that actually hold it into place. And I just put one on each corner, and that secures the artwork inside the frame, and then you can apply the hardware. Okay, now if it were a different case where you are doing a canvas, that won't be so, because you'll put the canvas in like so, and I'm noticing that the canvas protrudes off the back a little bit. Depending on the depth of the open back frame, sometimes it'll stick out a lot, sometimes it won't stick out at all, sometimes it'll stick out a little, and that's where the variety of these size braces come into effect. Now, even though it's got 2 screw holes, what I typically do is, instead of doing 4, one on each corner, 2 is enough for me, and usually I'll go top and bottom because I'll put my wire hanging here. So I'm going to pick the more shallow of the 2 because it seems to be almost exact to what I need. So I'll get 2 of those. And when you purchase these in a pack, they do come with accompanying screws. Another thing that I like to keep in my kit is this. It's called an awl, A-W-L, and I can actually poke a hole. It's just like a point set needle, and I can just poke a hole to create the beginning of an indentation, because even though these frames look like wood, they're actually resin, and they're kind of hard to screw into sometimes. So once I have taken the awl and created the beginning of a hole, it allows me to begin the screw a little bit easier, so it's not as forceful. So I'm going to take the screw and go ahead and use my drill, making sure that it's going the correct way. And I'm just going to zap this bad boy in. And I've got the beginning of it holding in my frame. Then I'll do the other side. Using my awl, I'm going to just poke a hole. Okay, and now my panel is secure. Now this painting was wired on the back with some standard wire that could punch a little bit more. I'm just going to rewire it because I don't want to ever wire the actual canvas. I want to wire the frame. So that way when the bulk of the heaviness from the frame, it's pulling on the weight of the frame, not the canvas. Because if this hardware isn't secure and it's just pulling on the picture frame, the weight of the frame versus the weight of the canvas can separate the two. So I'm going to flip it back around, right side up, and I'm going to do the same thing with my D-rings. I'm going to take 2 D-rings, and I'm going to just position them across from one another, but so that they're about midway in the frame. I want to make sure that my screws are not long enough, which again, they oftentimes come with screws, so they're pre-measured so that they know they won't punch through the material. And I'll go about halfway on my frame and use my awl and punch a hole, and then I'll take my screw and again position in the D-ring, and then I will position in another D-ring. Okay, and again, if you don't want to use a screwdriver, you can use a drill. I got this one for about $30 at the hardware store, but you can certainly use a drill as well. Now, normally I would take this completely off, but since this is somebody else's painting, I'm going to leave it on and then just reposition some new wire here and they can choose to take it off later. I take the soft strand wire, and before I even cut it, I'm going to thread it through and make sure that it circles back so that I have enough on each end to thread around. Now, when you're placing these D-rings on, you want them to be about 1/3 of the way down the frame, not halfway and not too far up, because you don't want the wire to stretch so that it's exposed. But you want a wire that's going to be semi-taut, but not too loose, right? So once I have a little bit of slack on either side, I'm going to snip the wire, and then I'm just going to position it. You know what? I'm actually going to go ahead and cut this off so that we don't get confused with it. Okay, so I'm going to position this around and thread it, pulling it all the way back so that it's as taut as it can be, and then just threading it around, trying to keep the binding as close as I can to the D-ring. And I don't want it to be super tight, but I don't want a lot of slack in it either. So that way, see, there's some natural slack here, and that way you can hang it on the nail without clipping on this part. A lot of times if the wire is too high up, it'll clip on this instead of the wire, and it could fall back off. But that way you have a pretty nice setup there with the painting and the framing, and then it's good to go. Now, some people will put paper on the back to make it look more attractive, and little bumpers to keep it from moving. You know, I don't really go into that. I usually punch through the paper pretty quick by accident, so I tend to not put it on. But whatever your comfort level is certainly fine. I will take some of this tape off to really doctor up the back of it, and maybe take the price off, because maybe you don't want to incorporate that into your pricing. But that's how you would frame a canvas piece of art in an open back frame. Now, for the panel, it's going to be the exact same thing, only now I don't need brackets. I just need to do the D-ring. So again, I'm going to go about 1/3 of the way down. I'm going to make sure this is right side up, even though they painted on the upside down part of that. I'm going to go about 1/3 of the way down. I'm going to punch a hole with my awl. And I'm going to take a screw here and repeat the same process. And do the same thing on the other side. Okay, then I'm going to thread my wire through, making sure that I have a little bit of slack on both sides. It should not have to meet the middle. You don't need that much wire, which is why it lasts for a long time if you do it properly. And I'm just going to pull this back on the tension to make sure it's secure. Wire it around. All right, and then there's a little bit of tension, so it's good to go. And now I have my panel on a painting. These are some student works that we're getting ready for a show, and they are good to go and ready to hang. Now, sometimes people try to choose frames that had glass in them and take those apart, and you see the prongs. These would be the same as using a panel or whatnot. And you can get away with this, but oftentimes these are a lot more narrow. I like to have at least an inch or an inch and a half of frame just to really showcase the artwork. This one was stained, so it could either be painted over or discarded, but a lot of times it's more difficult to take thin frames or frames from, you know, thrift stores and whatnot that people try to repurpose. A lot of times they can be more work than help. But I understand that you have to do what you have to do, so a lot of times when you're framing, you can pick and choose. But again, setting up your kit, maybe some soft wire, an awl, some wire cutters, a pair of needle nose pliers, some of the brackets, which you can purchase online, some of the D-rings, And all of those will come with screws, so you'll have plenty of screws for your kit. And then a drill or a pair of Phillips head screwdriver. And if you're doing panels, you may even want to invest in a point setter. Now you can also get paper tags or some kind of tags to put on the back of your work, or if you have business cards and you'd like to just put information on the back of those, you can tape them to the back so that they're easy to identify with the inventory sheets. But that's really essentially all you need for a good hanging kit, and it's the easiest way to prepare your paintings so that you're sure that they're ready for most exhibitions and shows. So I hope that this helps. Feel free to pop any questions, or if you need links to some of the resources, reach out. But hopefully this will help get you set up for your next showing experience.